cuffed. Well, I guess we don't get love cuffed until we go to the altar. The ladies get love cuffed at engagement.
Yeah, right.
So Jesse Rutherford, for those that are watching or soon to be watching, you're listening right now. The show has not started yet. He proposed to his wife, soon to be wife, how long ago?
On Tuesday. So just a few days ago.
Sitting next to you at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission meeting, which they made the mistake of putting the two of us
I know.
together.
I don't know who decided that.
That was a bad decision.
Was that Supervisor Galloway?
I don't know. I don't know
think
who.
it was Christine.
I think that was a staff thing. That they wanted us to be together, which I don't.
Which turned out to be
that's kind of on them. That's not on us.
Neil Williamson is watching. Neil, I'm going to put it this way. I wish you were here.
Yeah.
I think if you were here, you would be having a good time with us as well. And thank you for watching the program, my friend. Do you guys, before the show starts, want to give some props to Sir Neil Williamson? Anything you want to mention to him?
Butter.
That's a pull from Real Talk with Keith Smith right there.
Oh, wow.
All right, so we'll rock and roll, guys. We're going to talk, sit back, relax, and enjoy. We're going to talk politics here on the I Love CVille show with Election Day right around the corner. Jesse Rutherford follows this as closely as anybody, and today's show should be quite enjoyable, as Jesse Rutherford is one of those guys. Yes, he's an elected official, but he's kind of a down home, like very approachable, very likable elected official.
Man, I appreciate that.
I
He's so nice.
You tell it like it is, man.
Yeah, he's frank.
You do not pull any punches.
You know where you stand with Rutherford.
That's right. Hey, we got to tell you how it is.
You were comfortable in the...
Good, bad, or indifferent.
There you go.
Give the show a like and a share if you want to love and give Jesse some props. Put it in the feed. We'll relay it live on air. I see quite a bit of Nelson County on the heat map right now.
You know, it's a small town.
Any questions for JR, put it in the feed. We'll relay it live on air. Judah Wickower, things are looking good on our end. We can rock and roll when you're ready. Guys, good Friday afternoon. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille network, where our audience is Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Central Virginia, Commonwealth Country, and worldwide. Today's show is presented by the Clifton in Keswick. If you want a memorable dining, wedding, happy hour, and event experience, it's the Clifton in Keswick, where my wife and I have had fantastic memories ourselves. I am so pumped for today's show. For about an hour, you're going to get a very personable, very approachable feel of a man that I have tremendous respect for. Yes, a little Keith Smith.
Oh, man.
So Jesse Rutherford.
I like that. Wow.
Nelson County Board of Supervisors. Let's go to the studio camera.
We're not even, the camera's not even hot yet.
Let's go to the studio camera and let's welcome friends, inner circle friends of this program, and me personally. First, Keith, I love you. Jesse Rutherford, I love you guys as well.
Love you, man.
Jesse, we'll start with you, my friend. You're engaged.
I'm an engaged man. Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes, I appreciate it, and so does she. You know, I think should ask her.
What was the first question I asked you when you showed me the picture?
Oh, shoot, I don't remember.
I did the thumbs
Oh,
up
yeah,
thing.
did she say yes? Yes, she did say yes.
Can we ask you to tell us the flip book of the engagement?
Yeah, sure. So, we don't
have to get personal if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Sure we do.
Okay, sure we do. I'll give you the engagement story. So we had a very nice plan to go to a winery with a event, and she was fully convinced that's what the event was. Getting her nails done beforehand was a little bit of a trick. It required maneuvering of her grandparents and parents to kind of convince her to do it. And get up there, she was fully expecting us to be greeting guests of some magnitude who knew that I'd be getting on a knee right there within about 15 seconds, and the two only other people were actually photographers. So it was wonderful, beautiful. Shout out to 12 Ridges Winery for the venue, by the way. It was phenomenal. And if anybody hasn't been there, it is the tallest. It's in Nelson County. Shout out for Nelson County. I believe it's the tallest winery in Virginia. Highest
Really?
altitude winery. Yes.
Huh? What's
So-
altitude there?
I have no idea.
It's tall.
It's like at the top of Montebello. So,
Okay.
you know.
12 ridges.
Pretty
Danville City Councilor Lee Vogler watching the program as we speak.
Hey, I just was in his city the other day.
Do you want to give Lee some props?
Absolutely, Lee. Hey, man, I got that book with the otter, the Danville Otter book. Man, like that was a pretty interesting read. I will say I'm glad the otter survived the turbulence of going over the dam, but I'll forever be a different person after reading that book.
I'll straight up say this:
Yeah.
Lee Vogler watching the
Did it have a lot of
program.
pictures in it?
Yeah, I can only read pictures. It's actually pop-up. You know, just kidding.
Pop-up pictures.
Yeah.
Lee Vogler, you're watching the show. Your Danville and the jurisdiction that you
Yeah.
represent is now on my short list of places that I would move to if it was not Charlottesville, Virginia. It's Richmond, Asheville, and Danville. The comeback city,
hear Nelson
Danville,
County.
is making a huge impact. Did you guys notice that they're opening a temporary
For the
Caesars Casino?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's just going to be huge for Danville.
We're talking thousands of jobs.
And they kind of got in front of it, right?
Yeah.
They weren't afraid, and they made the hard political decisions
Well, you
to
know-
make that happen.
So, fun fact, I actually have a rich history with Danville.
Oh, love to hear this.
I used to run a manufactured home community in Danville all through college.
I thought you were
And
going to say moonshine.
moonshine, I mean, that's kind of hand in hand in Pennsylvania, Danville world. But I used to run a community down there in the Blair's Danville border. So I have probably about a 7-year career of going back and forth from Danville. So I got to see it from about 2011 to 2017, 18. And watching that growth and the comeback piece of that has just been phenomenal. I mean, to see downtown what it is today, it's nothing what it was 10 years ago.
He says to Jesse Rutherford, the Dan River Twins.
The Dan River
The
Twins.
Dan River Twins. Central Virginia, Charlottesville, Albemarle County. If you want to spend your money, head to Danville and do it there. Keith Smith, the distinguished gentleman, a man who spent 35 years interacting with politicians. Gentlemen, we want to talk about the Tuesday election.
Right.
Before we start anything Tuesday election related, we want to say anyone watching this program, and I see 3 states and much of the Commonwealth watching here, vote on Tuesday, please. If you
Absolutely.
take anything from this show, elections matter. Neil Williamson, that's for you. Vote on Tuesday. Open-ended question. Jesse, then Keith. Tuesday election. Anywhere you want to go.
Listen,
One shot, Jesse, on this. Judah would care.
one shot on me right now.
Yeah. There's your camera.
Listen, Tuesday is going to be probably a big change for a lot of expectations for people, especially over the last couple of years. This is right. I suspect that we're going to see it be extremely red. Where we are currently in the 5th district, we're going to see it be, especially after the redraw, it's going to be more Republican than we've seen in probably 10, 20 years. And if anybody remembers the Virgil Goode days prior to that, and then the L.F. Payne, and that mantra of went from Democrat to conservative and where those hard percentages came from, Bob Goode's going to have a very strong day on Tuesday. And I want to mention something in particular. Back in the last 15, 20 years, we used to use a couple counties as bellwethers, predictors for where the state's going to go, and specifically delegate Senate districts and congressional. And those counties were Fluvanna, Nelson, and Buckingham. Where those counties went, so did the Commonwealth. Where those counties went, usually so did the congressional seat. And I've got to say, looking in the last couple of years and the change of inflation, I remember we were on the show recently, what is going to be the top 3 issues? And someone in the commentary, I believe it was my good friend Jace Goodling, said inflation, inflation, inflation. Mm-hmm. And we were only at the first inflation. Now we're in the second, looking at the third inflation. That's going to have a huge play. And there's a couple other races that I'd like to talk about later in this show, but it's going to be, Tuesday's going to be red, very red.
So has the redistricting impacted that, you think? So when you say redraw, you're talking about the
Yes.
redistricting. So has that changed that bellwether look from your opinion?
I would say so the bellwether counties are still in the same districts respectively. However, you have had a very big, what I would consider like a cultural Republican change. So you had the counties that were also in the 5th at that time were north of Albemarle and Charlottesville, so which ranged from Greene County all the way to Fauquier, which is what you would probably consider a suburban Republican-esque. They serve metropolis areas, probably white-collared, a little bit more affluent conservative voters. And now you've got more of Southside. You've got a little bit of the 64 corridor going into Henrico a little bit, there is some suburban conversation in there too. However, in the last 10 years, especially since 2016, have been extremely red and have trended even more Republican. We've seen that reflection, especially in like counties like Louisa, where a lot more conservative board of supervisor races were won. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think these bellwether counties are probably going to stay conservative. I kind of think of them in some ways relative to like the Manchin situation in West Virginia. Like if you're looking at Buckingham, Fluvanna, Nelson, these were mining towns. They had industry for a long time, and now they don't really have as much going on. Fluvanna now is obviously serving the metropolis areas around it. Nelson is a similar conversation, but the demographics, your working class demographics, I mean, it's just hand over fist. The impacts of inflation, shoot, have you tried to buy diesel in the last week and a half? It's like $5 a gallon, if you can find it. Like, that's a scary reality, too.
And they're saying diesel shortage on the near horizon here.
In the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, in the next 2 weeks. To the point, and also this, my dad, who I talk with a couple times a week, literally has called me 3 times in the last 10 days, and he's encouraged me to fill my propane tank, to the point where he's saying that, like, and I love Tiger Fuel, I love the Sutton Brothers. He's saying these independent and even national
right.
Guys are going to have a difficult time keeping price in check for propane.
I just filled mine up.
There you go. Talk to us about that.
Literally, Yona and I filled those up, which we normally do not do. We were about a half.
That's what he was saying. He said filling up right now.
That's what we did, and that was at $4.
Holy cow.
$4.15 to be exact.
So it was not cheap.
It was not cheap, but we did. Let's fill it up now, because normally we're at 200. We had a 500-gallon tank. Normally, when we get to somewhere around 100 gallons, we fill it up. But we're at 250 now, and I said let's just fill it up, and we filled it up on that, and that was $1,000. Like it was about $1,000, something like.
And it's going to get worse. Right.
It is.
Yeah. So we filled it up, and I was talking off air. I mean, my in-laws, my sister-in-law lives in Europe, and her natural gas bill in Vienna is 4 times what it was this time last year.
Wow. I've heard conversations with some folks in Italy about utility bills, and essentially when you break it down, it's $1,000 a month, and that's without hardly using anything.
Yeah, we're going to have this conversation midwinter. That's
when January hits. Yeah. And if the Northern Hemisphere is going to have the winter that we're predicting, holy cow!
That's what we're worried about there. So let's highlight viewers and listeners. The beautiful, the talented Devin, is it Coombs?
Combs.
Yeah. Watching the show right now. She says, "I love you, Jesse. I was completely surprised, and I'm the luckiest girl in the entire world." Aww. Elliot Harding likes that comment.
Of course.
Kimmy Kruskamp likes that comment, as does Joshua Michael liking that comment. I see 2 campaign teams watching that are running for election on Tuesday. The Josh Throneberg team.
Oh, boy.
And the Bob Good team.
Oh, my.
On the feed.
This is
literally
exciting.
As we speak.
Awesome.
Bob Good and your team and Josh Throneberg and your team, we're going to analyze and break down the election here in a matter of moments. Let's also highlight what Kimmy Kruskamp has to say. She's a mover and shaker with the GOP locally. Right. She says this: Jesse Rutherford is one of the best dudes out there. So happy he and the fabulous Devin are engaged right now.
The fabulous
Let's
Devin.
welcome a TV station in Richmond and one locally to the program. Carol Thorpe, the queen of the Jack Jewett District, is watching the show. I believe, Carol, you were the initial founder of the Tea Party in Central Virginia. You're watching right now. Please offer comments and perspective.
Yep.
Janice Boyce Trevelyan said, They said Biden had emptied the diesel reserve. They report Thursday after Thanksgiving it will be empty, is what I completely read. Here's the question I'm going to ask before we get into the weeds, into diesel, into inflation, into some other topics. Tuesday's election, how do you weigh education versus the economy when it comes to Tuesday's election? Because a lot of the folks that I talk to, and we're all in the business of human connection and talking to people, have said it's either education, or inflation. Rutherford, why don't we go first with you?
In Nelson County, there's no local races right now, so it's purely going to be an economic conversation. So the national narrative on inflation, on the cost of living, on gas prices, on why you can't afford your rent, why your job's not paying you enough, it's all going to come down to economy, especially. And I would actually say that's probably accurate for a lot of at least this Central Virginia area. When it comes to education, that has a huge play. That obviously has a lot more play usually in non-national political election years. So, for example, next year we won't have one. I don't think there's any Senate races up, or federal Senate, I don't believe so. So it would be purely state and local. Yeah. Usually that's
next year's an off year.
Yes. So next year is when education will probably be more of a weapon, political weapon of some sort. But it will be. It's all economy right now. I mean, I can't tell you how many folks I've talked to in the last week who are, asking for me to front pay for a certain job because they can't afford to pay certain things. Insurance, like you talk to some Class C contractors right now about what they're paying for workman's comp, what they're paying for their trucks, what they're paying for their gas, and they're sitting there.
Just talk cost of goods.
And they can't increase their prices enough.
No, they can't
to offset that
because they price the buyer out of the market.
And even though we're talking right, even though we're talking inflation, those inflationary numbers really haven't hit us yet.
No,
on that end of it. Once they start figuring out that they're not making money,
and we're all already starting to see that. These guys are starting to go into December realizing, wow, we're already about to hit a wall. And with demand of so many different other products. I do, though, and I'm sure we'll get into talking about housing because that's what we all do here. But in the next 60 days is going to be a huge indicator of where things are going to go. But the voter on Tuesday, they're looking at their wallet. They're looking at how they haven't been able to either pay their bills or get anywhere in their current life.
So who was the person, I'm trying to remember way back when, who was the person that said it's the economy, stupid? Right?
It's the economy, stupid.
Right?
Makes sense.
And
James Carville.
That's exactly right.
The political strategist.
That's exactly right.
Democratic political strategist.
That's exactly right. It's the economy.
Yep.
And when it becomes about economic and putting, we had a great discussion about butter.
Yep.
So putting butter on the table,
right.
That's what people are going to vote on at this point. So how do you think the turnout's going to be? Right? Do you think blue and red? How's that going to go?
I think that's obviously been a real fun conversation, especially in the Central Virginia area. Interacting with some of the local folks in this area and community leaders. It definitely appears that the left end of the spectrum just doesn't have the movement that they had hoped they'd get.
What do you think that is?
I honestly think because at least in this area, the Virginia Democrats need to focus in other areas. They need to focus on 2 congressional races, the 2nd and the 7th.
So we're talking
Spanberg and Kiggins versus, I believe it's Loria Allen, I think, something of that nature. Yeah. And those are the 2 districts that they need to focus on because they understand. And I think another indicator about enthusiasm is look at VPAP's data related to the 2 congressional races, Bob Good versus, Josh Throneburg. I mean, for the first time, we have a congressional candidate that's out fundraising the Democrat in the 5th. Usually when it came to Cameron Webb, when it came to Jane Dittmar, when it came to Leslie Coburn, Tom Perriello, they outraised the Democrat they outraised the Republican every time. This is one of the first years you've watched zero enthusiasm in dollars and cents get thrown.
So you're saying follow the money.
Follow the money.
But why do you think the shift, and I think Jesse's dropping knowledge here, like we're seeing a lot of purple and otherwise blue areas from a politics standpoint. Why the shift? You strictly say it's the wallet?
I think it's a wallet, but you have to kind of look at what we just lived with the gubernatorial race.
Okay.
So let's talk about Youngkin McAuliffe for a second. I mean, McAuliffe, I'm sure there's some folks who would disagree with me, obviously, but, he gave a lot of gifts to the Republicans with some of his statements when it came to education.
He lost because of that. Three times he said that.
He said that, and that was one of the most idiotic things a person should say.
And then he doubled down and tripled down.
Double down, triple down,
Well,
and
he
then
didn't know how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And
Well, he couldn't get out of it.
He couldn't. There was no exit at that point.
Yeah.
After the second time, he
Right.
goes to debates, and then he's saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mothers out in so many communities. They're like, even the moderate Democrat who, probably is going to take a lot of issue with the Roe v. Wade situation. It's like, I don't agree with you. I do have a say in my child's education.
So I've been in local politics for 35 years, and when you make a mistake like that, you just raise your hand up and say,
And just
I screwed up.
I screwed
After
up.
the first
And
time.
quit
I made a
talking
mistake.
about it.
I made a mistake.
He-
And, I've been there, done that, right? And you think you can
Sure.
fix it.
Talk your way out of it.
You think you can fix it,
Yeah.
but you can't. And sometimes it's just to raise your hand up and go,
just admit.
You know.
And so I want to bring that into the perspective because that's coming into play. They still have the hangover of, the gubernatorial race and what the Democrats were bringing to the table. So we're going into this with not only that, now the inflation conversation, and combining of those two situations is what's equaling the red wave in my mind.
I think it's a very good read here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I get the inflation part. We've been talking about this
That's
for quite some time on the end of it. But balance that off with the fact that, look, we just had a jobs report that boosted where we got more.
Yeah.
We've got, jobs are, we have.
Isn't it
October payroll
2.8%?
Surge, thank you.
They surged.
They surged,
And
thank
isn't
you.
the Charlottesville area like 2 or 3% unemployment?
2.9%.
That's like
That's in
So
August.
you guys read the car report.
Yeah.
Is that what that was happening right
yeah,
there?
he gave me the packet yesterday.
he read the car report.
There was a lot of cool data
We
on
were
that.
supposed to be paying
I was having a
attention.
really good discussion, reading.
So what were you guys doing in that meeting?
Governing.
Governing.
You're-
I cannot believe they put us together. And then we got admonished by Ned.
This is. I'm
I'm going to tag Supervisor Galloway here. Keith, finish your thoughts here.
We totally got admonished. But the fact that unemployment is not typically tracking with inflation.
Right.
Is that a play here? Is that?
That's a really great perspective. And I kind of like looking back at like 08 situations where, all of a sudden you had a lot of jobs, a lot of people lost their jobs.
We prefer to call it the time of great unpleasantness.
It was a very, very hard time for a lot of us and our families.
Oh, yeah.
So I think gosh, how do I want to say this? It's weird having a job and still not being able to pay your bills.
That
is the most weird phenomena. And I'm waiting. And there's going to be somebody who cops on and says, "Let's talk about living wage. Let's talk about all that." Well, guess what? Even if the living wage number, we're already there. That $15 an hour, the $20 an hour, so many of those jobs are already there. They still can't pay their bills.
So we had an excellent report from the PHA, Piedmont Housing Alliance, talking about you need at least $20 an hour just to afford rent.
Rent in this area. What was the number that we got at the RHP? It was like for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath.
RHP?
Regional
Housing Partnership. It was like $1,500. Ned.
I'll just tag Supervisor Galloway.
Yeah, you better hop on here. Tell us about the used car prices. They're coming down?
I talked to him about that.
They are actually softening.
That's good.
He
They're
says
softening here. Comments coming in fast and furious here on the show. Josiah Leonard, the GOP messaging this cycle is consistent, where the DNC messaging is inconsistent. He has that feed here. Local newspaper on the feed watching the panel as we speak. Eric Brazil, inflation will be the topic of discussion in South Central Virginia as well. Wow, the feed is blowing up right now. You have 2 TV stations watching you right now. Multiple moms are putting on the feed, and I'll paraphrase for you guys, saying that education is what's going to get us to the polls. Maybe it's inflation that determines the vote, but education is driving the engagement.
I can see that. I can agree with that too. Especially in probably areas around metropolis areas. Totally.
Well, they're connected, right? Inflation and education is connected. So as inflation goes up, I mean, you're struggling to keep
Yep.
teachers here to start with.
They have no interest. I mean, when you can go, I think one phenomena that we've lived in Nelson County is, hey, one of the biggest things that we wanted to do was digitization. That's a new word for me. Across the entire county, where internet is accessible.
Did you have a Keith moment there?
Did I have a Keith?
Think you did.
Did I start it? No. But that kind of crossfired in a way, because then all of a sudden more education options became available to families that had lifestyles that could support it, and families that, mom worked from home. So now all of a sudden there's a lot more home education. There's a lot of private schooling that's happening part-time in the household. Our school population is continuing to decrease.
Well, let's put this in perspective here.
Yeah.
Henley Middle School in the Western Albemarle School District, literally the school district that people get up and move into because it's so good.
Right.
Henley Middle School, its enrollment has dropped considerably.
Wow.
Think about that.
And why, you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's a number of factors. I think it's how
there's some social things in there too.
I think,
there's a lot of social. I mean,
pandemic, how that was handled, virtual schooling, how that was handled.
Yep.
The bus driver issue is one of the things.
I was just thinking
the curriculum, and I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
And how the curriculum is evolving, and I'll leave it at that, is one of those things as well. And teacher dropping in numbers in the classroom is impacting that. But when Henley Middle School is dropping in enrollment, that says a lot.
I did not know that.
And you're talking arguably a middle school from a Commonwealth standpoint that's top 10% in the state.
That's
in number of students.
No, in performance.
In performance.
And money spent per pupil.
Per pupil.
Yeah.
So to kind of add on to that, I think when we've seen especially the last several years, those demographics that can afford to exit, they don't want to be part of a school system that's been politicized so much and weaponized in 1,000 different ways, right? Like, it's just not something you want to be part of. And if you can afford a private school that matches your values, that matches maybe a sport thing or however many other different avenues, and you can afford it, or you have the lifestyle for it, they're doing it in droves.
So if
It's true.
if what happens on Tuesday, which I think we're all predicting that it's
Sure.
going to be a bit of a red wave for the state of Virginia, at least,
Right.
on that end of it, how is that going to impact those two big ticket items for the folks in the state of Virginia and locally? Inflation and education. Is that going to help? Is it going to hurt? What tools can they bring to help out? I mean, you're a connected guy. What do you think?
I think when it comes to inflation, as much as I hate to say it, that's a state issue a lot more often than it is a federal. Like, gasoline is a federal issue, no doubt. Obviously, Nelson County doesn't have any well drilling situations, so we're not an impact on that. However, so those smaller items like the cost of bread, the cost of oil, the cost of your iPhone, the cost of insurance, maybe some of those things go into play. But by and large, when it comes to residential, that's a state local issue. Yeah. I'm not blaming the federal government for the local and state's inability to do something that we've been doing for thousands of years, building places to live, right? So as it relates to housing, I would say that's a state local issue. As it relates to what's happening in your grocery store, what's happening when you get to Exxon and you're filling up your car, that's a federal issue. And that's not something that we can control. So do I think the things are going to necessarily improve the day after, on Wednesday? I don't necessarily think that's in the making, because we're going to see a Obama 2013 situation where all of a sudden you have a split government. You have a Democrat president and you have a Republican House, if I'm not mistaken. That was in 2013. So
What about the Senate? You think that's
the Senate, that's going to be interesting. However,
I mean,
listen, I read Drudge Report this morning, and that's a conservative, hyperbole, website, hyperbolic website, and it said like 54% chance that it's going to be conservative. Now, I usually take that with a grain of salt. I think it's still likely to stay Dem. We know the House is going.
It's awfully close.
I think the more interesting things here is what's going to happen to Oregon, right? Ooh. Are we going to see Oregon go red? And guess what? The data is coming out saying it is.
That's going to be huge.
If Oregon goes, so, and now here's my
how does that impact everything?
Right, this is my bellwether prediction, right? So how big the red wave is going to be in Virginia. You can predict it off of 2 other congressional districts. 5th district's not even a question. Don't even question it. It's going to be Bob. Bob's going to win by like such a high margin that it's going to be hard for any future Republican to meet it. However, the 7th and the 2nd, look at Abigail Spanberger, who is an incumbent Democrat. Virginia has historically been friendly to those incumbents. They historically have been, unless your name is McAuliffe. However, if she is able to maintain her office there, which I actually don't think she will, if she's able to maintain that, that means that we're not going to have a huge red wave. We're just going to have a red splash. If we see like the Virginia 2nd, which is the Virginia Beach area, go red, I would easily tell you that, hey, you know what, it is a red wave of some sort. If we get neither, then it's just going to be red break even, and then we're just going to have a stagnant federal government.
So that's Kiggins and Loria.
Kiggins and it's not. Yeah, it's
Loria?
Kiggins and Loria. Yes.
And
So back to your Obama
Yeah.
scenario where this is we're not going to get much done.
You remember
which
the
is-
years of just flat?
which is it's
Wasn't-
interesting
Yeah.
because at that time we were not looking at what we're looking at now.
Right.
Right, economy wise, right?
Right.
It kind of we could sustain a little bit longer, but if we can't get
The
the
inflation.
federal government to all be working on the same wave to your point, I think this gets worse. I mean,
It could.
Jerry and I have been texting
Yeah.
offline. I think this recession that we're in my opinion,
Yeah.
I think we're in one.
Oh, we've been in one.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen
Been a
the-
smoke and mirror game.
We've been seeing the effects in, like, you can always tell by watching any local or state media where they're saying, oh, well, 3 reasons why this recession isn't the same as the last one, or 4 reasons why, how
Well,
you
the-
prepare for it. And you watch that
Well,
transcends into...
first and foremost,
Yeah.
there's never been a recession that's been exactly alike. It's never, ever been.
And we shouldn't count
ever
on
been that
that.
way. So it's funny. I don't know if do I have the.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking about this earlier this morning. I'm wondering, and this is a bit cynical for me to even say, I'm wondering if this red wave happens
Sure.
the way you think it will all of a sudden by the end of that week we'll be officially told we're in a recession? Do you think that'll happen?
I think no matter what happens, whether it's a bright red or light red, it's going to come out. Because you got to keep in mind, it's almost guaranteed to be at least a light red wave. We know the House is going red. The Congress is going red. However, if all of a sudden the Republicans somehow secure the Senate as well, and you're looking at scenarios like Dr. Oz, right, in Pennsylvania. You're looking at places like, some gubernatorials out there like Oregon, or maybe the Herschel Walker scenario. Like, if you find...
That's been a mess.
If you find the Herschel Walkers... And now keep in mind, though, politics is politics, and you'd be blown away at who can still win.
Oh, dude.
Right? Like,
I don't think Herschel Walker is even out.
I don't-
Despite some of the ladies that are now visibly identifying themselves.
Yep.
Like literally saying, I am the person
Yes.
that he told
Yep.
to have an abortion.
Yeah.
Literally, that's happening right now.
Yeah.
I legitimately think that Walker could potentially still win this.
I mean, I don't
You're
want
gonna make. You were about to make a prediction saying he is going to win this.
I'm...
Is that what you're doing here?
I am this far over I'm like 51%.
That he will win.
The only reason why is if you check, I'm trying to remember what the website, Project 536 or something like that. I mean, it shows R plus or D plus a little bit. I think he's already lost, because you got to understand the demographic that's voting red is that working class group, and that state
Especially in Georgia.
is full of folks who can't afford to fill the tanks in their cars.
Elections matter, and it's all about turnout.
It is all about turnout. And the thing is that you're not seeing Democrats turn out. I mean, you're not seeing it at early elections. You're not seeing it, on the streets with signs. You're not seeing it with,
But
yeah.
maybe I'll throw a little bit of
Sure.
a wrench
Yeah,
into this.
Please do.
Yeah.
Because previously, this early voting
Right.
and mail-in
It's a
was
whole different game.
It's a whole different game, right?
Election starts in September.
Yeah. So could that impact your thinking on that end of it? So in others, because I think statistically, depending on who you read, early voters typically.
Yeah,
Go-
I think that depends geographically.
Yeah.
Because cities...
Locally, how do they go?
Locally, so for example, if you're south of Charlottesville and Albemarle, I mean, you're just getting the same people who would vote Democrat who just voted early, right? So you just made some convenience for them.
So that converting the independent or the middle voter.
I don't see that happening. Like, I have met very few, soft R's or soft D's that was like, or
little
even
C,
independent,
little D.
little C, little D, and you're just sitting there and they're like, oh, well, I'm definitely going to be a Democrat this year. I mean, no, I haven't really met that person. I've met some folks who have given their opinions on the presidential, and
Sure.
if there's a Trump nominee or any of that.
Sure.
However, they also were the same people who voted for Youngkin this past election cycle. Nelson County went for Youngkin. I just want to come out and say that because that's important to know. Nelson County normally doesn't do that. If it goes red, it goes red by a little bit. Youngkin won by such a
Huge.
margin
Yeah.
in Nelson. And another bellwether kind of place in Nelson is to see what happens at Wintergreen. Wintergreen's Nelly's Ford. That place has been trending conservative. And I think there's actually a better than 50% odd that demographic, which is affluent, white collar, retirees, is going to go red this cycle.
Yeah, because they want to protect their 50.
Their 501,
Not their 501,
Voting with the
401ks. Was going nonprofit there for a second.
Yeah, you were going 501c3? No.
Sorry about that. I got my fives and fours mixed up.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because I think the turnout's going to be a lot stronger than I think everybody thinks it's going to be. But at this table, who early votes, who votes in person? What do you prefer?
I vote in person.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I'm going Tuesday with the better half and our son, and we're making the big
Good for you.
this is our American duty.
Right.
Like he's 4.5. We making not a show,
sure,
but
yeah.
like
Well,
parenting.
You're teaching his
Yeah, that's a
civic
good
duty.
experience.
Yeah.
Civic duty on
Civic
go ahead
duty,
and vote.
right.
Well, Yona and I, my wife and I, debated that for a while, and I said no. And I tell you what, if you ever want to see somebody passionate about
Smith?
voting, would be my wife about that, or an immigrant, right?
Sure.
It's
an experience.
it's
for
an
them.
experience. We
Yeah.
do it. We cleared our schedule. It's an event. We go there. We vote. It's just a part of the American experience that,
Yep.
for somebody, my wife is not American. Well, she's
Right.
American now, but she was born in Austria. Actually, she was born in Beirut, but she was
born in
Austrian.
Beirut.
To go ahead and do this. So for us, this is a thing, right? We make a day out of it.
Yeah, and I know for myself, I also knew that I was going to be getting engaged near the time of election, so I voted the first day I could vote. I didn't want to, in case any time
So how many
changes.
times you vote? Just once, right?
What's that? Vote early, vote often. What's that saying's been going on forever.
Yeah,
but I personally don't have, and there's a lot of folks who's going to disagree with me on this, and I don't necessarily have much issue with early voting. I do agree with the folks that say election day is supposed to be one day, and they're fine with there being an option for those who can't vote, those who work, those who have jobs that and I appreciate that. And now that Virginia has made election day a holiday, if I'm not mistaken,
It is a holiday.
It is a holiday now.
Kids are out of school, I believe.
I think that there's even.
fact, I think they are.
I think that we should encourage more election day voting as opposed to September. Here's the thing: it eliminated something special in politics, which is called the October surprise, right?
Oh, that's right.
You remember that, right?
Oh,
That's been a thing since for many decades.
So what is it, like August surprise now?
Yeah, you have to come out right after you get nominated and nobody knows your name. Oh, surprise, this guy. Oh, okay, controversy this early. Forgets about it 2 months later.
I
than
never
votes.
thought of that. That's interesting.
So, and that was, I truly think, a kind of a Democrat move to move it to September in a way, because it eliminated what we called the October surprise. Any controversies, any.
But that cuts
major,
both ways, though, right?
No, it does cut both ways, and so that's why you didn't see a lot of fight back on both to move to September.
Yeah.
So, I personally think as much opportunity you can give a person to study who the candidates are and reveal what their voting records are, or whatever philosophies they may differ on, is a good thing. I do believe our emergency folks, our elderly community, need to have those opportunities to vote that they may not be able to do on election day. I'm not necessarily the biggest proponent of no excuse early voting. That said, I did do that. I think I do have a valid excuse.
You
Very
had
valid excuse.
You had it the best
Like
excuse
if I went
ever.
there and I said I'm probably getting engaged and I don't know what I'm going to do, I think it was like this past Tuesday. What's the week after that? I don't know. I might have to delay.
Do you think that early voting is deterring people from showing up to vote? Do you think
it is.
making
I think it's a
difference?
distraction.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at that and like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and vote. And I think it takes away some of that, what you're talking about, that nostalgic, that value, that experience. Like
almost the pomp and circumstance.
Like there's something special about having your car full of kids
the
and
sticker,
saying, come with me and get
donuts,
I voted. Yeah.
The donuts.
Yes.
Waiting in line.
Waiting in line.
Going in the booth, pulling the curtain.
Yes.
It's the pomp and circumstance. It's like why we get married and have weddings.
Right. Otherwise, you just go to the courthouse.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have weddings?
Well, okay. He's about to have a wedding. We had a wedding. Otherwise, you would just go to the courthouse.
Right, exactly. So I agree. I think it does take away some of that value. I think
Neil Williamson, I legitimately was going to ask that question based on your tweets from this morning.
Ready.
And he puts it in the feed here. He asks, you're Mr. Rutherford.
Ooh. I am Mr. Rutherford. That's a first for me.
You're Mr. Rutherford.
Or Supervisor
The only people
Rutherford.
who get that is like my not even my dad, my grandfather.
You got Mr. Rutherford from Neil.
And my brother. Yeah.
So Neil was tweeting this morning, and Neil, I follow you closely on Twitter. I love you, Neil. You know I do. I find you hysterical. He wants your thoughts.
You mean Captain America?
Captain America is the man. Your thoughts on ranked choice voting.
Love it.
And I would encourage anyone watching this program to follow Neil Williamson on Twitter. And he did a thread today where Sally Hudson, the delegate, presented to the Board of Supervisors why ranked choice voting was important. Your thoughts on RCV ranked choice voting?
I lived it.
You love it?
I lived it and I love it.
Okay.
Right? And
Tell us why.
Here's the reason why. So I just went through the gubernatorial method of ranked choice voting, right? I went into that thing so hesitant. It just seemed like the most complicated, convoluted counting situation. And you were watching, like, you had Youngkin, Peter Schneider, Amanda Chase, Sergio something another, whose name I can't remember. And, you had like 7 people, right? And so I'm sitting there, and you have like 7 different flavors of politics being thrown at you. And you're like, gosh, I got to pick 1, 2, 3. I only want to pick one. And then, if that's not the guy. However, during the process of persuasion, so this is an important thing to keep in mind. You have what's called the persuasion process, where people's trying to convince you. I was originally, I was a Kirk Cox guy. He's a good friend of mine. I'm loyal to my friends. He was conservative, somebody who I idolized, and I didn't know who I was going to put as number 2, right? And I got into it, and I remember one day I was sitting at a persuasion event, essentially, and Youngkin says, hey, I respect every person in here who's voting for Kirk Cox, number 1. But just want you to know, and he went on a tangent about how much he supported some of his ideologies and says, I'm going to take those values with me to, the governor's office. And that was like, I'm sitting there like, Youngkin just did it for me.
Yeah.
Like, he's my number 2. And he respected the loyalty to certain people. And he's like, I get it.
It's also playing the game.
Yeah, totally. That's political. That's all politicizing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that
and
only
people
that,
thought he wasn't, by the way.
What's that?
They didn't think. People thought he didn't have the skills.
No, dude, he had some of the best.
I think that's called code switching.
There you go.
He had some of the best body language and how to do
code
that
switching.
stuff. But the thing is I wasn't going to vote for anybody else. I was thinking about just voting for one and not anybody else. Now, what that allowed is you have some fringe groups who, are on that list as well that I really didn't want to win. So I was like, I have to pick my 2 and 3. And if I didn't pick the 2 and 3, my number 5 would have been the winner, right?
So the positives of ranked choice voting are less priority potentially on fundraising.
Yes.
The positives of ranked choice voting are certainly a more diverse potential pool of candidates and elected officials.
Yep.
The positives of ranked choice voting, Sally Hudson would say, you can make a legitimate argument, is it's a truer form of democracy.
It is, yeah.
Truer form of democracy.
Yep.
The cons of ranked choice voting.
So I would say the cons is it's complicated. Like, trying to explain to the overall populace how ranked, like, for me, it took me a little bit to figure out how statistics work and how you break things up.
But you're engaged, right?
I'm engaged. But if you take, all right, you're a truck driver, right?
Yeah.
All you do is you were at that time
You've
listening.
elevated my position.
I did.
Thank you.
Good for you. You're getting paid really good. 80
you.
cents a mile or $2 a mile.
I'll take it.
The CDL truck driver is making about $140,000 a year.
Mrs.
average.
Smith's been telling me for years to get a job. So.
Yeah. Diesel
Thank you.
$6 a gallon though.
Oh,
but
good Lord.
I know. But here's the thing: that guy trying to explain ranked choice voting is so hard.
So that's my
And
concern about it.
I can echo that. We don't have a culture of it, and where I would suggest ranked choice voting starts is locally, so that you can take those demographics and coach them in through it. And after 5 or 10 election cycles, you've now created a
Well-
culture that understands.
well,
Go ahead, Keith.
Let's face it. I mean, most people walk
I
into
just tagged Sally Hudson, by the way.
most people walk into the booth and pick one flavor, right?
Oh yeah, they just go right down. But but also at the same time, those bellwether counties I was talking about, Nelson, Fluvanna, Buckingham, are renowned for split votes,
So
right?
talk about Fluvanna. That's my home
Yeah,
county,
so let's
right?
talk about- let's
right.
talk-
So if we had ranked choicing voting in this thing, so you might want to take a minute to
Yeah.
explain what that actually is for some few people that.
Ranked choice voting.
Yeah, some folks that may not know. We're a bunch of political.
Let me simplify that real quick. So ranked choice voting is simple. You're running for a, let's just say, supervisor position. 4 people. So at this point, you have 4 people who want to run. One of those is like your guy. You're going to vote for him. You put him as your number 1. But you still have the ability to vote for the next 3, which means, okay, if number 1 is eliminated, who do you want to be the winner? So then you pick your number 2.
You do first, second, and third.
First, second, and third. Who
Yeah.
do you want? And if, all right, so if your first guy gets eliminated and there's a second guy and it's your third pick, your third most likely candidate becomes the elected,
Yeah.
right? So that's already, the fact
So-
I had to
so-
go and explain that is hard for an
Well, that
average
I mean, that was hard right there.
Yeah, it was.
and that requires you to really be engaged
Yes.
in each one of the.
and
The ranked choice voting approach also deprioritizes the shotgun voting approach.
Right.
And we've seen shotgun voting tactics utilized as local as the Charlottesville Council
Sure.
election.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll leave it at that.
pick
Sure.
your 1, 2, 3, done.
I'll
Yeah.
leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's you roll into the booth. Most people just go down ticket, down
Yeah,
ticket.
and what I would suggest if ranked choice voting were to become more of a consistent thing in Virginia is encourage your localities to adopt it first. Teach
Start
them at the
small.
local level where it's probably just going to be 1 in 3 options, right? 1 to 3 options, and then start taking it up to state delegate, state senator, congressional, and then gubernatorial.
Well, to speak of Sir Neil Williamson, that's assuming you've got multiple people running for the same.
You could just have, 1 or 2.
that's not
1 or
locally,
2,
that's-
it's just a regular election then.
So locally, that's not uncommon just to have.
I mean, heck, sometimes you just have one.
That's the point I'm
More
trying to
often
make.
than
is-
not.
I mean,
Yeah.
Supervisor Galloway, Supervisor McKeel, and Supervisor Andrews, Almore County Board of Supervisors, ran unopposed.
in
So
my-
if they voted for themselves, they win.
In my county, Chris Fairchild ran
Yeah. Unopposed.
unopposed. So the ranked choicing doesn't work in that. But it's complicated enough.
It is.
To get.
I'm not going to disagree.
Well, it's just it's complicated enough to get folks to show up and vote, right? And have.
That's the only knock that I see with it.
It's hard.
Other than that, I think I want to just emphasize that pro. It gives you the ability to pick the candidate that you're most like, right? Even if it's not your number 1, you've now picked who number 2 is. And so more often than not, we've seen a lot of places where somebody's winning a race at 35%, right? Because you had 5 people run for it. Now, you can have some states where you have to do what's called a runoff, where you have to get at least 50% of the vote, which I think is also a good thing. I want to emphasize, anybody who wins less than 50% but becomes majority, that's not necessarily the best
I will say
reflection.
this, the old guard when it comes to the 2 parties of power are not the OG. I'm not talking about the 45 and under, 40 and under here. The OG
Right.
do not want RCV
No.
because they want to control the power.
Because you get to control it with
You
the
get to
partisan
control
side
the-
of that.
exactly.
If you're in
So I think we're a ways away from RCV, Commonwealth, and locally.
the
Well,
state
that
of
would-
Virginia is not going to allow this.
Yeah, about to say that's going to be.
It's a pipe dream.
Yeah, that's going to be required at the
So
state
when do
level.
we say,
Yeah.
and I've tagged Sal, and I believe is Delegate Hudson on the feed here, when do we say that this is not ever going to happen?
I mean, we're already there. I mean,
The likelihood is very minimal.
It's
Yeah.
actually. I mean, we're talking about something that would be great, and it would take probably 10 years to coach. But there's no state assembly in Virginia, Republican or Democrat.
That's the point.
That's going to end up on game day. And I can appreciate Sally Hudson being into ranked choice voting. There are some Republicans who are. However, more than likely in both contingents, they lose so much control,
So much power.
that it's not going to be of interest.
Right.
You know,
Well, you got to get it past the
state assembly,
The state assembly.
Virginia delegates,
Yeah.
Virginia senators,
Yeah.
and the governor. So you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
have the majority of all these entities, and it might actually have to be more than just a simple majority. It might have to be a 3/4.
So is the
Yeah,
push,
so Neil-
why the
Neil
push
would know that.
happening then? Why the push happening?
Who's pushing for it other than Neil?
And Sally's pushing it.
Well, I think Neil is just speaking about it because
No, no.
Sally's speaking about
Sally's Neil's a conversation starter.
That's
Yeah.
Sally
exactly
is
right.
pushing it.
I
That's
think
exactly
I
right.
could see that. I think I
it. Neil
don't-
doesn't take a position. one
I
way or
would
the other.
totally, if I was in a subcommittee and it came up, I would vote in the affirmative for ranked choice voting. I would also not spend too much political capital because I understand that it's probably going to die within like 30 seconds.
Well, that's it's interesting you just said that
Yeah.
because you're a local politician
Right.
and you understand political capital better than
Ah,
anybody.
it's expensive.
You know, it's very expensive
Yeah.
and it's difficult for an elected official
Sure.
because you have to look through your list and go,
Yeah.
okay, this is the one thing I want to burn my political capital on
Yep.
to go ahead and try to make it happen.
Neil says 2021 legislation allowed localities to choose RCV.
Yes.
And then RCV is effectively an immediate runoff. Southern states have been using RCV for military votes for a generation.
I believe that. Yeah.
So Neil is saying it's already been approved by the state?
No, that's not what he's saying.
Did I mishear that?
He's saying it was allowed for localities in 2021 legislation to choose RCV.
Got it.
Right. I think, is Albemarle thinking about doing that?
I don't think so.
That's what Sally was doing.
She
in
was
front
presenting to the soups about this.
Yeah.
about
okay.
this, so they can do. Otherwise,
yeah.
why would she present if it was
Yeah, if
already?
they weren't
in
interested.
play-
Okay.
in
But
place?
not to get in the weeds here, because we do have a 1:30 coming in 7 minutes.
Absolutely.
We're 54 minutes in. The
Right.
time flies when you're having fun
Wow.
with homies. Okay.
Right.
So Tuesday's election. Keith, why don't you go first here?
Well,
Tuesday's election.
So I'm
Where
going
do
to
you want to go?
I'm going to take it a little bit higher.
Okay.
Get out and vote, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Show up, vote. If you haven't voted already, please vote. Elections matter. Sir Neil Williamson, to quote him. And also, we got another election coming up in less than a year.
Yep.
Consider throwing your hat in, particularly for local elections. Contested elections matter. Elections matter. Get out there and vote and hear your voice.
Our
be heard.
version, the I Love Seville Network's version of Deep Throat, is a anonymous Twitter handle, literally called Anonymous, that routinely is watching this program. And whoever this person is, and I have no idea who they are literally sending us information that is like on the level of Woodward and Bernstein, the information that they get.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Like I'm getting stuff that is like,
Oh, boy.
okay.
Oh, boy.
Like stuff that like most of the time I can't even talk about.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this it's whoever this person is as connected as anyone I've ever known in Central Virginia. They send this, and I can mention this on air. Ranked choice voting is used in New York City mayor race now.
It is,
But
yeah.
look up Arrow's theorem. No voting scheme perfectly captures preferences.
Okay.
My
So,
brain just went back to Nixon.
Arrow's theorem. Arrow's
Scary.
theorem. So Sally, you'll watch this, Sally Hudson. Arrow's theorem. Jesse Rutherford, handful of minutes for you, sir.
Sure. It's going to be get out, vote, no doubt, guys. Your registrars are probably open today. Make sure you get out there and vote. As it relates to what expectations we should have, I'm going to talk about this from a congressional side. 5th district will be very red. The 2nd district would be the most likely to be red. The 7th district is going to determine where the rest of the national politics are going to go. If the 7th goes red, that means this is a serious, very red tsunami of some sort. And that will reflect in a lot of the gubernatorial races, such as Oregon, Georgia.
How does it reflect on the races in 2023? Let's just talk local races. in
Sure.
2023.
As it relates to local races, you're going to see a rebuttal. You're going to see the education. You're going to see a social rebuttal. It's going to be a good weaponization for, delegate and senator races. I would imagine if you're running for delegate here, you would try to take some of the ammo of what happened the last cycle and use that to get your demographic out and voting for you. I would say when it comes to presidential, which is the 24 conversation, whatever happens here, if Republicans somehow get the Senate as well, it's almost a near guarantee that Republicans will win the presidential.
Unless they screw it up.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, they've done this before, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They historically have done this before, right?
Democrats have as well.
I only see one way the R's can screw this up, and I'm not going to take a deep dive into that.
Yeah.
I'll let people.
That's a different show.
Read between the lines on that one.
I'm
There's
just
one way
saying,
the R's can screw this up.
It has happened before.
It can.
Yeah.
It has happened before.
Jason Howard, Rio Road says, Jason, I love when you watch the program. We've dubbed him the king of Rio. RCV does not benefit either major party. It's like Coke or Pepsi going out of their way to help Cheerwine or Dominion Root Beer get more shelf space.
It's sure.
No one freely gives up power. That's a great call there, Jason Howard.
That's fair.
Tuesday vote. The whole point of this show, the essence was vote. Jesse Rutherford is a phenomenal person. I think you're looking at a potential, I mean, you got people putting this on your feed, and I agree with this, a potential state senator here.
Oh, no.
I think Rutherford's future is very, very bright. Keith Smith's future has been bright for 35 years.
Thank you.
He is an inner circle
right.
friend. Judah Wickhauer is our director. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is the I Love CVille show. 57 minutes flew by in what has felt like 5 minutes.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you,
We will
guys.
see you guys on Monday. Take
Wonderful.
care. Nicely done, gentlemen. That was awesome. Very nicely done. He'll tell us when the mics are off. I'm going to give you a fist bump.